My name is Councillor Ron Polillo. I'm the acting mayor tonight. Our mayor, Simon Yu, is out of town tonight, so I will open up tonight and offering some comments to begin. I want to start by saying we are meeting here on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lheidli T'enneh, on whose land we live, work, and play. Thank you for all showing up today. It really is great to see such a strong turnout of residents and business owners and community leaders and neighbors. Your presence here underscores the commitment and concern we all share for the well-being of our city. I want to begin to welcome my fellow councillors who are in attendance here today. We have Councillor Kyle Sampson, Councillor Tim Bennett, Councillor Susan Scott, Councillor Trudy Klassen, Councillor Brian Skaken, and I send regrets from Councillor Corey Ramsey, who became ill after our meeting last night. She won't be here tonight, but Councillor Garth Frizzell will be here later for the session. I also want to acknowledge MLA Shirley Bond is here tonight. Thank you, Shirley. And Art Kane and Lara Beckett from the Regional District of Fraser-Fort George are here as well. Our community, like many others in the country, are facing significant and complex social challenges. Issues surrounding mental health, addiction, homelessness, and encampments affect us all. Despite increased resources from our city and persistent advocacy for support from the provincial government, these issues persist, highlighting the need for continued effort and collaboration. We have seen some success in our advocacy efforts, particularly in addressing housing and shelter needs through the province's Housing First initiative. Over the last 12 months, we've had a number of meetings with the Minister of Housing and the Premier, particularly since we signed the MOU, you may recall, back in June of last year. And they are aware of the challenges we are facing and the need to work together to increase housing here in the city. However, as many of you know, housing alone is not a comprehensive solution. The necessary resources for mental health and addictions and other health-related issues, often the root causes of homelessness, are beyond the expertise and mandate of municipal governments like the City of Prince George. It is time we hear directly from those impacted by the challenges, and that's why we're here tonight. We can advocate for resources, but we need your input to develop effective plans and to stand together in our efforts and advocacy. We know safety matters. We want every resident of Prince George to feel safe. We want a vibrant community with a strong downtown core, enjoyed by all. Today's Community Safety Town Hall provides a coordinated opportunity for council and staff to hear from you. As residents, business owners, or volunteers, this is a platform designed for you to ask questions, to share ideas, voice concerns, and to be heard. We've had the open house portion of the event with some really good discussions. I know I had some good discussions with some of you. Following my welcome here, there'll be a presentation from our city manager, Walter Babich. This will be followed by a facilitated panel where you can interact directly with council, staff, and invited guest panelists. You'll see Superintendent Sean Wright here from the RCMP, our Fire Chief Cliff Warner to share their thoughts and concerns. Our objective today is not to just discuss the issues, but to take action. By listening, we're compiling data here tonight, generating possible actions, and providing leadership. While local government may not have all the tools to solve these complex problems, we can and we must do our part to mitigate their impacts and address our citizens' concerns. Our goal is to come together as a community in understanding, compassionate, and proactive dialogue, leveraging our collective voice and ideas to create solutions that benefit us all. I want to thank you for being here again tonight, for your dedication to make Prince George a better place for all of us. Now it's my pleasure to hand things over to our facilitator tonight, Christina Benti. We want to thank Christina for being here and facilitating. She has more than 20 years of extensive experience in policy and governance, including 2 terms as a mayor for the town of Golden. She's a professional speaker and facilitator, civic leadership performance coach, and author, and just an all-around good person. We've got to know her over the last couple of nights, and the fact that she was the mayor of a town right next to my hometown of Revelstoke, not too far away in Golden. So I want to welcome Christina, our facilitator, here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. And I just want to thank the City of Prince George for inviting me here. I'm pleased to be here to be facilitating this evening. And as indicated, I'm a recovered politician, and it's been a while. But I'm also a social scientist, and I began my political journey about 22 years ago when I first got on council. And here's what I can tell you, is that I thought my job was hard then. But I have watched over the years, over the last couple of decades, the role of local government expand and the complexity of the challenges that local government faces to get more complex and bigger. And so, those challenges are very weighty, and sometimes some of the obvious solutions create future problems going down the road. But one of the reasons that I accepted the invitation to be here is I really am a big believer in community conversations and gathering communities together to have conversations. And from my observation, from working across the country with a number of different local governments, is that town halls and meetings like this are rarely done because they are uncomfortable and they are messy and they're complex. And so I just want to thank you folks for being here, and thank the folks that are sitting at this table participating in this. I think that it's, like I said, it's uncomfortable, and so people don't like to do it, but I'm a really big believer in doing that and engaging in conversations about these challenging issues that not only communities across the country are facing, but it doesn't matter because it's happening here, and it's impacting you. So I'm going to be facilitating the question and answer period, and my intention is to, as we speak about some very difficult and uncomfortable things, that everybody's here to kind of both listen and learn. So not just you folks listening and learning, but the folks are at the table here listening and learning. And so that there's an environment where everybody is curious and different perspectives are welcome. And that maybe you can leave tonight, and again, that's my intention, that you would leave with maybe a better understanding of kind of what's going on, but also that some of the stories are heard and that the collective wisdom in the room is captured. So there's gonna be, I think it's important to recognize the fact that there's gonna, nobody's gonna walk out of here with a 5-point plan. And so I guess expect to hold the fact that the emotions and maybe the frustration that they're present in the room, but the overarching intention is really to listen and learn from one another and really collect that wisdom that's shared and the stories that are shared. So council, as you know, is going to be reviewing the information. So there's going to be a lot of data that's collected. You've had an opportunity to provide input. There's a number of different ways to be able to do that. So all of that information is going to be compiled and shared with council. And as indicated, they want to find some solutions. They want to find a move forward plan. And they want to be able to identify what's our right next step in this challenge. So council also, from what they communicated to me, is they want to let you know what's already being done to address community safety. So it's, because oftentimes what happens in communities is there's the, what's the city doing about this? Nobody's doing anything about anything. And sometimes it happens underneath the surface, and it's not always easy to pay attention to. So part of this evening is really having an opportunity for the folks at this table to actually let you know, here's what we're doing, and here's some of the constraints that we are facing and the challenges that we are facing. So that kind of, I just wanted to set the stage for tonight. So we're going to have a couple presentations, going to take a little bit of a bio break, and then come back, and there's going to be an opportunity for some Q&A. So with that in mind, I am going to turn it over to the city manager, Walter. And he's got a presentation for you folks, so thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Acting Mayor Palillo, for your welcoming remarks, and to Christina Benti for being here to facilitate this event for us. As Christina mentioned, my name is Walter Babich, and I'm the city manager here in Prince George. This is a fantastic turnout. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your day to be here to share your views on this important issue for us. You know, this town hall was initiated by City Council, so I want to start by thanking our members of council for doing that, and also thanking our city staff for all the work involved in making this happen. There's a lot of work behind the scenes to make an event like this happen. I wanted to start by saying a few introductory remarks before getting into the detailed presentation. As has already been said, we all know that this one town hall can't solve these ongoing complex challenges. We also recognize that there are no simple solutions to many of the issues that we, along with cities all across North America, are facing. But we believe that hearing different perspectives and understanding the impacts of these issues from the experiences of our residents, business owners, volunteer groups, our advocacy groups, and our frontline staff are essential in forming our effective solutions and actions. City Hall is located downtown, as you know, and we witness these social issues every single day. I want you to know that as city staff, we are aware of the issues in the downtown area, and we remain interested to continue to listen to your concerns. But we also understand that we must continue to thrive as a city. Through our leadership from City Council, we know we need to continue to encourage development, jobs, tourism, and prosperity here in Prince George, while also addressing the needs of our vulnerable citizens and our concerned residents. So we wanted to start our slide presentation with this slide behind me that is entitled Who Does What. This slide is one that many of you might already be familiar with. It is something we use quite often. It shows the roles and areas of authority of the different orders of government in Canada. As you can see from the slide, the federal government is responsible for national and international issues, including the areas shown on the slide. The provincial government is responsible for regional matters across the province, including the areas listed such as housing, the environment, healthcare, and social services. In BC, we have two local government categories, municipalities and regional districts. As a municipality, the City of Prince George is responsible for local services such as the ones listed, including bylaw enforcement and the RCMP. And our council shapes our community through our bylaws and policies and land use planning. We like to share this slide to set the stage because we know it can be confusing to understand what responsibilities certain levels of government have. This isn't meant to be seen as shifting the blame for problems or anything like that. It's only meant to share the realities of areas of jurisdiction and authority within our government system. We need to work together with all orders of government on the issues of homelessness and community safety. Having said that, the role of local government in these circumstances we're here to discuss tonight is a bit challenging because, as you can see, housing, healthcare, and addiction treatment are really not within the jurisdiction of a municipality. So often, the local government's role is centered around advocacy. Advocacy with our provincial government, advocacy with our federal government to receive the supports that we need in our community. Our council and staff, I want you to know, has been working very hard behind the scenes to ensure that Prince George is seen and heard amongst so many other cities in BC that are also pushing for the very same support from the province. We're working to ensure that our relationship with the province and other partners remains steady so we can all work together for the shared goal of addressing homelessness. Next slide, please. Thanks. So next, I want to touch on some background information about illicit drug decriminalization in BC, because it's related to the discussion this evening, and some of you may not be aware of these changes. Some are very recent. The slide behind me summarizes some recent changes to the exemption in BC under a federal statute that's called the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. In January of 2023, the federal government, at the request of BC, granted an exemption as a pilot project to run for 3 years. This exemption meant that adults 18 years of age or older in BC could possess up to 2.5 grams of certain drugs without arrest or charge. This exemption includes opioids, cocaine, methamphetamine, and MDMA. Areas that were excluded from the exemption originally in January 2023 included airports, daycares, and schools. Fast forward to September of 2023, and at the request of the province, the exemption was narrowed by the federal government. Effective that date, possession was also prohibited within 15 meters of public playgrounds, spray pools, wading pools, and skate parks. In other words, those areas that are really designated for youth. So very recently, as of May 7th, due to increasing concerns about public drug use, this amendment has now been narrowed further, again by the federal government at the request of BC, to prohibit possession in all public spaces. So the areas that remain exempt from arrest or charges for possession are private residences, designated healthcare clinics, lawful sheltering areas, and overdose prevention sites, OPS sites. We understand that these changes aim to balance public health and safety and to provide law enforcement with the tools to address concerns about increasing public drug use. Superintendent Wright will be speaking further about the impacts of this pilot project. Next slide, please. So next, I wanted to provide a brief history of how things have unfolded here in Prince George and what's been done so far. As Christina has mentioned, our council and staff thinks it's important to give you a little bit of information about what's been done up until now to help you better understand how we got here. And the foyer is full of poster boards that have this information in much more detail, but I just wanted to highlight some of the areas for you in this presentation. So back in June of 2019, City Council and City staff recognized a need for supportive housing and signed a framework agreement for an integrated health and housing development. That agreement was signed with BC Housing and Northern Health. Following this, in 2020 and 2022, as per that framework agreement, the City of Prince George purchased land on First Avenue as the city's contribution for this development. That land purchase totaled about $4 million. In spring of 2021, the city experienced our first notable encampment. That prompted a series of legal actions. In August of 2021 specifically, the city sought a court injunction to remove 2 encampments from city property, one at George Street, you might recall, and one at Lower Patricia. While the BC Supreme Court initially ruled on this matter in October 2021, allowing 1 encampment to remain at Lower Patricia, further legal actions followed, which ended ultimately in the city's decision to withdraw our appeal in March of 2022. It's important to note that alongside these efforts from a legal approach, the city has taken some proactive measures to address public safety and community health. The Select Committee on a Safe, Clean, and Inclusive Community was formed in 2020, concluded in January 2021. The city has also launched a downtown cleanliness initiative in partnership with Downtown Prince George, funding it with an annual budget of $50,000. To enhance public safety, an RCMP foot patrol was established and the city added 8 bylaw enforcement officers in 2021. We also funded 2 city outreach workers, which became permanent positions last year. Significantly, circling back to that development with Northern Health and BC Housing on First Avenue, in June of 2022, we leased a part of that First Avenue property to BC Housing, resulting in the construction of a building with 50 housing units for those at risk of homelessness. Back to a more funding initiatives, in 2023, the city also added 7 new RCMP members, 2 support staff, and with 4 more RCMP members joining in 2024. The total amount of that investment is $2.5 million. In May of 2023, we did a lot of work with council to make our bylaws compliant with the requirement to designate a temporary overnight encampment site in the city. So council approved the Lower Patricia Boulevard site as the only temporary overnight encampment site. That enabled us to manage other public properties more effectively. It also allowed us to plan for the eventual decampment of the Millennium Park encampment. We feel that our collaboration with the province has been pivotal, as has already been mentioned. In April of 2023, Premier Eby met with City Council, leading to our designation as a pilot city for the provincial homelessness initiatives. This was formalized with an MOU in June of 2023, making Prince George the first city in BC to have such an agreement. Next slide, please. Thanks. Fast forwarding to September 2023, on the basis of those bylaw changes designating the Lower Patricia area as a temporary overnight sheltering area, that allowed us to move forward with the decampment of Millennium Park. The city and the fire chief felt that life safety risks were too urgent to allow that encampment to continue. In January of this year, City Council approved doing site preparation and utility connection work with an estimated cost of $470,000 for a transitional housing facility to be built by BC Housing by this fall. We pushed for this facility because we believe the transitional shelter facility will be fundamental to ensuring that there are enough shelter spaces for those who need them, which will help us address the closure of the Lower Patricia encampment. Recently, as part of our regular community spring cleanup, the Lower Patricia encampment and the area around it was cleaned up, and we are advised there's 22,650 kilograms, which is about 50,000 pounds of waste was removed from the area. Additionally, in the last few weeks, we've started a downtown safety patrol pilot project as a joint initiative between bylaw services, the fire department, and the RCMP, all working together to do patrols overnight, starting at 10 p.m., going until 6 p.m. On the advocacy side, we're also continuing our relationship building and repeating our requests to the various ministers through a council advocacy trip that was held just last month. And lastly, Mayor Yu's Standing Committee on Public Safety was established this month and recently had their first meeting, reflecting the city's ongoing commitment to ensuring a safe and inclusive community. Next slide, please. So that's a very quick summary of the work that's been done to date, and I'd like to now go into a little bit more detail around encampments in Prince George. As we've explained, the Lower Patricia encampment area is considered a court-protected encampment, and the city cannot decamp that site without court permission. Specifically, the wording from the court order says, absent other suitable housing and daytime facilities, the occupants of those encampments must be permitted to stay at the encampments. So in other words, the city must provide proof to the court that there's suitable housing available for the persons in the encampment, as well as daytime facilities. This takes us back to the need for the transitional shelter facility and working with BC Housing to receive evidence of offers of housing and availability of daytime facilities for the residents of the encampment. In the meantime, our bylaw staff continue to regularly patrol through the encampment and surrounding neighborhood as well as downtown. As Chief Warner will explain in more detail, the city's fire and rescue services also regularly visits the encampment to extinguish fires that are not being monitored, are too large, or that are not burning clean materials. The fire and rescue services team also provides safe burning information for occupants of the encampment. And during extreme cold and heat events, the city works with BC Housing and local outreach agencies to provide warming and cooling centers for unhoused citizens. Next slide, please. So what's next? So we think looking ahead involves two major focus areas. First, it involves the city's goals for the encampment in downtown, and second, it involves the steps after this town hall and how we leverage the feedback received from you. So addressing our overarching future plans, firstly, the city remains committed to collaborating with BC Housing to ensure sufficient housing and daytime facilities are built for all unhoused individuals. This is crucial to substantiate our case before the courts for the closure of the Lower Patricia encampment. In a recent letter to City Council, the Minister of Housing pledged to facilitate data and information sharing in compliance with privacy legislation and policies subject to BC Housing protocols. This data is expected to include statistics on individuals supported, offers made, and transitions into shelter and housing, as well as inventory of available and upcoming housing units. Receiving this data, we think, will mark a turning point intended to support our pursuit of a court application to stop permanent overnight sheltering at the Lower Patricia encampment. If our court application is successful, the city intends to proceed to clear and fence the area at Lower Patricia. Next slide, please. So shifting focus to next steps after this town hall this evening. As has already been mentioned, city staff will organize the feedback received from you from this evening, hold a facilitated workshop, and present a report to City Council at a June Council meeting. This report will outline the insights from this event and the proposed administrative actions. I want to end by saying that the city remains committed to fostering transparent communication with you, our community. If you haven't already, I'd encourage you to subscribe to our news and alerts or follow us on social media platforms to stay informed about news, engagement opportunities, and City Council decisions. So that's it from me for now, but I look forward to answering your questions together with our senior staff during the Q&A portion. Thank you, and I'll now hand it over to our Fire Chief, Cliff Warner.
Thank you, Walter. Good afternoon. Today I'm going to spend some time and talk to you a little bit about the fire service, what it is, what we do, what our responsibilities are, what our authority is. Talk a little bit about fire orders, how fire orders work, how it impacts my ability to work on keeping the city safe. We'll look a little bit at the changes that have taken place downtown. We'll talk a little bit about the fire service impacts. We'll talk about the efforts that we've taken to ensure that the community remains safe. Talk a little bit about where we are in 2024, the impacts that we're looking at, fires, wildland fires. We respond to alarms, commercial alarms, residential alarms, carbon monoxide alarms. We go to medical aid incidents. We support the BC Ambulance Service and pre-hospital care. They guide the condition of a patient based on a color spectrum that I've put up there. Purple would indicate an individual that's been identified as likely not surviving if they don't receive medical attention. Red would be a condition where a patient could potentially not survive. Orange is typically a condition where a patient should go to the hospital, but it's probably not considered life-threatening. And yellow are situations that are typically minor and result in a routine response. Rescues, we respond to motor vehicle incidents, water, ice rescue, high-angle rescue, confined space, and hazmat incidents. We also respond to complaints, burning complaints, excessive fire risk, smoke reports. Next slide, please. So about our authority, as I mentioned, we are guided by the Prince George Fire Protection Emergency Response Bylaw. We are also guided by a provincial act, the Fire Services Act. We are mandated in the community to inspect and ensure safety in public buildings, life safety buildings, high hazard buildings. We are able to respond to complaints and effect change with respect to complaints. We're historically been guided by hazard identification and assessment, and we work to achieve in achieving compliance within those driven goals. Next page, please. So talking about fire orders. So fire orders may be issued when compliance measures are unsuccessful. We rely on the Fire Services Act, specifically Section 21 and Section 25. Section 21 speaks to 4 clearly defined fire hazards that have been identified that are deemed to be an extreme risk. The intention of Section 21 then refers to Section 22, which looks for compliance. It's achieving compliance to meet or reduce those extremes to low or moderate. Section 25 speaks to a concern for a fire or explosion hazard that could result in an imminent and serious danger to life or property. Typically, the results result in evacuation of the area and a complete elimination of the hazard. That's an example of the order that was issued with respect to the Millennium Park decampment. Next slide, please. What changes have we in the fire service seen? So prior to 2020, we were reporting a consistent increase in our call volume year over year. In 2020, there was a noticeable increase in change in the downtown core with respect to unhoused and individuals in a transient state moving around in the fall of 2020. In 2021, we experienced the organization of the first permanent encampment occupancies at Lower Patricia and on George Street. And in 2022, we saw the start of the Millennium Park encampment. Next slide, please. What impacts did we see with fire service? So there was a twofold increase in our medical aid incident response in 2021 and 2022 over 2019. Burning complaints, prior to 2020, burning complaints for the fire service typically was a seasonal response. In the spring, we would see residents conducting yard cleanup, cleaning up their leaves, their branches, figuring the best way to just dispose of them was to burn them. Through the Clean Air Bylaw, that's not permitted. We would respond and we would explain, look for compliance, and have them put the fire out. In 2021 and 2022, we saw those burning complaints response doubled. And now we're seeing them during the fall and the winter months. Primarily, we're seeing them as fires that are being used for warmth and for cooking food, or for non-compliant fires that are happening outside. Item fires, fires that are just a collection of things that are burning. We've seen those double in 2021 and triple in 2022 compared to 2019. Next slide, please. So what efforts has the fire service taken? We've adapted messaging to our on-duty crews, outlining the changes noted and establishing expectations in response for customer service. We've continually assessed the risks and complaints against Section 21 and 25. Do we have an ability to use our authority to affect change? Up to this point, other than the Section 25 in Millennium Park, we haven't been able to identify an extreme risk that's required us to put one of those orders in place. We've developed and delivered encampment fire safety fact sheets to all of the encampments, and we go down there on a regular basis. We interact with the folks that are there. We provide information for them to try to work at maintaining safety, reduce the risks and hazards that might be there for them and for those that are around them. In August of 2023, with a fire and explosion hazard order issued to the City of Prince George relating to the continued deterioration of Millennium Park and ultimately the decampment of that park. We worked with other city stakeholders and community stakeholders in the direction of the installation of the no-post barriers at Lower Patricia in order to affect and maintain access for emergency crews, and also to limit the potential densification that could happen in that site. Next slide, please. 2024. As everybody knows, Prince George, as I understand, it's the first time that the City of Prince George has been identified in severe or extreme drought conditions. We're taking that very seriously. We're taking many measures, including identifying continually the risks and hazards in the downtown, and we're also considering those against the risks and hazards that could impact the entire community. We connect regularly with the BC wildfire representatives in Prince George at the zone office. We plan, we train, and we respond in coordinated effort for wildfire events. In April, the city hosted a provincial wildfires Fire Smart conference. It's a significant event for the City of Prince George. It allowed us to do pre-planning, training, and work in preparing for a response if a wildfire was to happen. We're continually working at increasing and improving our resources to the community so that we're able to protect the entire community. Next slide, please. I've had the opportunity to connect with downtown Prince George, some residents in the community that have come forward with concerns. And one of the key takeaways for me for that was a misunderstanding of what our expectation and how we respond compared to what's being seen and what's being experienced. So in conclusion, I encourage, if you see a fire, you see smoke that's concerning to you, at the time it's happening, call it in, report it. That's our job, that's our responsibility. If you think there's a concern for life safety or property safety, call 911, report it as you would as a fire. If it's a report of smoke or it's a concern from more of a bylaw or a concern for other safety or the numbers there, that's our fire dispatch center. They will dispatch a crew and that crew will respond and they will assess the situation. A lot of times what's seen by one person isn't seen by the crew that's responding. If you're calling in and you're reporting a concern, let them know where you are and be available to that responding crew. Provide them information, tell them what you see. There's some concern and frustration that they see the fire truck go and it just drives by from what's seeing, and they either aren't seeing what you see or it's being assessed in a different capacity. What I heard loud and clear was there was some concern that those types of things were happening and it wasn't looking like the fire department was providing the level of service that you as the citizens were expecting. That's a concern for me as the fire chief. If you're not satisfied with the service you've received, then call me and tell me. I'd be happy to meet with you, happy to chat with you, and I'm happy to understand what was it that happened, what did you experience, and what can we do to try to make that better. talked a little bit about the concerns overall for for wildfires. Put a segment there on fire smarting. It's a great website that everybody can go to and assess how are we doing to protect ourselves from what the potential could be if a wildfire was to impact the city of Prince George. Thank you very much.
So this evening, most of the information, I would say the majority is on some of the info boards out there, and a lot of it was covered early this year in my presentation to council to kind of recap the statistics from last year, but there's a considerably larger audience here, so I will go through some of those things and kind of speak about the situation that we're dealing with regards to not just criminal events, but also other types of calls for service. So if we could move forward. Basically, this shows the number of calls for service the RCMP in the city of Prince George has received over the last 4 years. So 2020, a bit of an outlier with the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously. And then 2021, a noticeable spike in calls for service, not unique to our jurisdiction. That seems to have happened pretty much everywhere. But you can see 2022 and then last year, the last full year we have stats for, we are trending down on calls for service, which is a good trend. Looking at kind of the types of offenses that we deal with primarily, they're broken up into, in large part, 2 categories, very broad categories: persons offenses, so things such as assault, robbery, sexual offenses, and then property crime, which is obviously theft and that sort of thing. So first of all, I'll speak to property offenses. They've remained fairly steady, and you can actually see a bit of a disturbing uptick in some areas. You can see robberies are rising a little bit, and then assaults are going up as well. So a lot of those robberies are not like takeover bank robberies you see in the movies. Typically what they are is in large part shopliftings where an offender is confronted either by store staff or security, and they will pull a knife, they will pull bear spray, they'll pull a syringe, at which point then we classify that as a robbery because there's been a weapon or force used to try and obtain property. So that is a disturbing trend that we've seen increase fairly significantly here over the last year or so. And then moving over to property offenses, there's actually a fair bit of good news. Relatively speaking here over the last few years, you can see a kind of a more or less steady trend downward, which is good. What I find is a particularly good news story here is break and enters have decreased significantly, and those are incidents that I'd describe as traumatic to most people, whether it's a break into your business or your home, it's a violation of your space and your privacy. So good news on that front. Moving on, the total types of, sorry, just going back one slide. Do we have the call type totals? Nope, looks like we missed it. So anyways, it just kind of captures the 2 things I'd kind of shown there, that violent crime was rising slightly and property crime going down. So unfortunately, a bit of a disturbing trend is downtown. Similar to the fire service, we've seen a significant uptick in calls for service in that concentrated area. So if you remember back to the first slide, we were about 45,000 calls for service in the entire city for the year, and over 8,000 of those were in the downtown area. So that's a pretty significant concentration for such a small geographic area. So a lot of those calls I'll get into on the next slide. The types of calls we deal with down there. So the majority of them aren't necessarily thefts. The majority aren't necessarily assaults. They aren't robberies. The vast majority of calls for service that we respond to in the downtown core are really calls of disorder, for lack of a better term. So suspicious persons. You see the second from the left, mischief, loss of enjoyment of property. So that's a category of criminal offense within the criminal code where essentially it's causing a disturbance, and this could be people refusing to leave from private property in front of a business or that sort of thing. And you'll see that basically there's no violent crime or any what I would consider to be traditional crime on that list. So really it's dealing with a lot of nuisance behaviors within that geographic area. So on the far right, though, you do see mischief, $5,000 or under. So typically that is damage to property. So that might be from fire. That might be, quite typically, it's a rock thrown through a window in the middle of the night. Our detachment building, I feel the pain of the downtown business owners as well. We've had 3 windows broken over the last couple of months overnight as well. So we do fully understand what's going on down there. Moving forward, these are on the next slide. I just wanted to provide some up-to-date statistics. So basically, this is the year-to-date. This was as of May 11th. Violent crime, again, it's increased about 1%, so it remains relatively static. So, and you'll see other criminal code offenses, which have increased by 6%, driven largely by breach of conditions, so 24%. So one of the major impediments we face as police is we arrest people, we charge people, they go to court, and they are released again, typically on some sort of bail conditions or electronic monitoring, and we inevitably find them in violation of those conditions. So that does occupy a significant part of our time now that people are remanded in custody much less than they were several years ago. And I do have some slightly updated stats going to this week, so including the last 2 weeks. So total violent crime is actually down 3% now over last year, and yeah, other criminal code crime is up 7%, not 6% year to date. Moving on to the next slide, property crime. Again, this was as of May 11th. All property crime was down 9% overall. And I think the most significant stat on there is break and enter to business, the majority of which occurred in the downtown core and other light industrial areas overnight. So 25% is a pretty significant reduction. On the next slide, I wanted to include this. This is the crime rate and caseload statistics put out by the provincial government each year. So it's quite an extensive document. I think it's about 40 pages. So this is just a snapshot of municipalities that are policed by the RCMP that have populations of 15,000 or more. So it's kind of our comparator universe. Extremely difficult to see on the screen, but starting in 2019, the average crime rate in British Columbia in those jurisdictions was 95, and I believe that's per 100,000. In Prince George, it was 234. So we were well over double the average for the province. And the caseload per officer, the average in the province was 71, and Prince George was 134 per officer here. So really significant caseload for our members here, and a pretty significant crime rate for a municipality. So we did a resource study. We had a lot of conversations with the municipality, and we have added some additional positions to the detachment, and that's given us a bit of capacity to do some proactive work that we didn't have time to do when we were simply in a reactive mode. And fast forward from 2019 to 2022, which is the last year published, the provincial rates are almost exactly unchanged. But for the municipality of Prince George, our crime rate's down from 234 to 184, and our caseload per officer is down from 134 to 105. So that's a pretty significant change over the course of 4 years. So definitely trending in the right direction. If we can kind of alleviate our caseload, it does give our officers more time to focus on dealing with those underlying issues and proactively targeting those problems. So moving to the next slide, this is the Crime Severity Index, so the CSI, and this is Statistics Canada calculates this for basically every community across the country. And it's a very complex formula, and it's a bit controversial as to the formula they use, and I know Councillor Claassen was at a meeting with several other municipalities there in the last couple months to kind of debate the validity of it and some of those things, but I would say it's a rough estimation in some ways. So basically, this is just a collection of the stats from 2019 to 2022. So you can see the top box is British Columbia overall, went from 104 to 97 to 96, back up to 100. And Prince George started very high, 2019, we were 250, so we were almost 2.5 times the rate of the provincial average. We went down to 227, stayed at 227 the following year, and we went to 207 in 2022. And I'm cautiously optimistic that 2023 will continue that downward trend. So I think we're definitely trending in the right direction there, regardless of whether some persons, including myself, have some disputes with how Stats Canada puts them together. So moving on to the next slide, I just wanted to talk briefly about a few issues of note or things that we've been dealing with kind of as the police here in the community. So one that was touched on by Mr. Babich was decriminalization. So this was a real curveball for police in many ways. So, and I think many ways which were unanticipated by the powers that be that both lobbied for and put the initial iteration of decriminalization into practice. So basically that eliminated the ability of police to go and interact with individuals who were using drugs, smoking meth, smoking fentanyl on a sidewalk in front of a business. People would call, they would obviously not want that going on in front of their business or in a public space where they use, and we had no legal authority to go talk to those people and even ask them to move along because that was no longer an offense. So I won't get into the politics of the issue, but as was already discussed, it's been walked back in public areas. So police do again have the power to intervene. We can arrest those individuals to move them along if need be, if they're non-compliant. But it definitely gives us a tool we were advocating for the last year to help basically assist us in reducing some of the disorder issues that we find in our downtown core, and I think most municipalities were running into. The second issue of note is the BC gang conflict. Used to be referred to as the Lower Mainland gang conflict. It's really spread across the entire province. This is higher level illicit drug trafficking is what drives it. And last year we had a high number of murders, and I would say the majority of those are tied directly to players within that conflict coming up from the Lower Mainland and trying to establish a foothold. Prince George is a hub city for many, many things, and the same geography applies to the illicit drug market. So if you can control Prince George, it's an excellent distribution hub for the north and potentially into the Yukon and other areas as well. So that's definitely an issue that's putting a lot of pressure on our resources. One of the initiatives that we've put forward here over the last year or so is we've created a problem-oriented policing unit. So as I discussed earlier, our very high caseload kind of keeps basically all of our frontline officers occupied virtually every minute of the shift responding to calls for service and then dealing with the subsequent investigation and paperwork. So basically this unit was a unit that we can deploy into problem areas or problem issues and try and address them where we wouldn't have time simply responding to individual calls. We've already seen some pretty good success with it with regards to a lot of the organized shoplifting and resulting robberies that came from that. They've worked several projects on that, as well as you'll likely probably saw in the news, dealing with some of the issues with diverted safe supply. We had them focus on some of that enforcement as well. The fourth issue of note that I've listed here is youth. We've noticed a disturbing uptick in some violent and organized crime within the youth that we haven't seen here over the last several years. So that's definitely an issue of concern for us and something that we are definitely focusing resources on and hoping that we can alleviate some of those underlying factors and remove some of those problematic individuals. So that is particularly difficult as the province of British Columbia effectively holds almost no youth offenders in custody. And obviously, everyone's probably aware of the closure of the local youth center, so that only leaves the one in Burnaby. And at any given time, I think there's very low numbers of maybe a dozen or 2 dozen youth in custody remanded there for the entire province. So it is difficult to manage if there is no threat of incarceration. So again, we're working with several partners, the school district, that sort of thing, to try and alleviate a lot of those issues. The Knights Inn and the North Star. So these are, or either are or are becoming, low barrier public housing projects. These are a significant concern for us in policing, depending on the manner in which they're managed. We've had several issues at the Knights Inn over the last year and a half or so that it's been in operation. We've executed quite a number of search warrants for drug trafficking there. Unfortunately, the environment for many of the individuals there who just want to have a peaceful residence has unexpectedly degraded. So we're working to try and assist them in removing that criminal element. The North Star, of course, is much larger. Over 90 units are going to come online here or have started coming online. So definitely a lot of potential for it to be very quickly just back to the way it was when the Connaught Inn was closed. So issue of concern for us, and definitely something that we're going to keep an eye on and try and work with several groups to try and avoid. And then the last issue that I've listed here is REVOI. So that's the Repeat Violent Offender Initiative announced by the provincial government, I think it was about a year or so ago. So we've had pretty considerable success with that. We have, if memory serves, I believe 24 individuals identified in that program here in Prince George, and I believe 20 of them are remanded in custody right now. So that's been a good program for us to work with Crown and put a little bit of pressure on Crown and the other agencies to have these individuals held in custody rather than simply released on conditions which are largely ineffective in most cases. So I just wanted to close out with the final 2 slides, are basically 2 case studies, and these are kind of things I came across in reviewing some files here over the last week or 2. Just to kind of maybe give everybody a bit of a picture of some of the issues we deal with, or just how the process unfortunately works many times. So the first case study is a male. He's 26 years old, typically from the Chilliwack-Abbotsford area, but like many people for many occupations, many reasons, find their way to Prince George. Arrived in Prince George in about October 2023 and had 20 police files by the time April 22 had rolled around. So contained in those interactions with police was on December 21st, there was a local hotel here in the downtown core. This individual went in, stole master keys and a key card, was roaming around looking for things to take. He was arrested, subsequently released from custody with a condition not to go there. Typically, when a person's not held in custody, it takes about 3 months for the paperwork to get to Crown and for charges to be assessed. In this case, it was about 3 months. March 19th, Crown advised no charges as they felt it was not in the public interest. So then that individual is out without conditions, and 3 days later, on May 22nd, there's a break and enter to a business on 5th Avenue, and he's arrested inside the business. So frustrating for us, for our members, and I'm sure very frustrating for many of the citizens in this town to see that cycle happen. So moving on to case study number 2. This again is a male offender, 33 years old, typically from the Kitimat Terrace area, spent 2023 largely in Kelowna, shows up in Prince George January 2024. By May 9th, this individual had 22 police files, which included on May 3rd, broke into a business on 2nd Avenue at just after midnight. The suspect was gone by the time police were called and arrived on scene. So surveillance video was obtained the following morning. So investigation continued to identify that individual. However, in the interim, at 2:45, this individual committed a break and enter in the 300 block of Quebec Street, just a few blocks away, and was arrested inside the business. Police held that individual to attend court and put forward a report to Crown Counsel. Crown called back that day and directed that the individual be released by police on an undertaking without seeing a judge with a future court date. So then on May 6th, we again arrested this individual about an hour before midnight at a break and enter of a compound in the 3300 block of 22nd Avenue. So again, we arrested this individual, held them for court, and the next day they were released on bail. So 2 days later, they were observed by staff from the original break and enter, where they had been identified from the surveillance video. Police attended, arrested that individual, and was held for court, and 4 days later, again released on bail with conditions. So these are some of kind of the revolving door frustrations that we have, and kind of the cause and driving factors for repeat offenses and a high volume of offenses, not just in the downtown core, but throughout the community. And that's everything I have.
All right, so next up, we're going to have the